Today we're going to talk about Diffie-Hellman exchange and the newer stuff that replaces it for quantum cryptography is what I've added. I've added a new project showing it turns out to be incredibly easy to use the new lattice-based cryptography. So that's what I'll do. I'm not going to do bother with 523 because there's problems with that project, but I'll demonstrate this. Oh, 801. Not 810, but 801. All right, yeah, that's what we're going to do. All right, so let's start with the Diffie-Hellman exchange. All right, so we're going to explain how Diffie-Hellman works, and the basic goal here is key agreement. You're trying to get two people to agree on a key without sending that key directly over the network. You send constructed information over the network that is designed to be insufficient to determine the key. And then there's various protocols that do this, and we'll talk about how things can go wrong. So it all started in 1976. This was a classified U.S. military secret for at least a couple decades before this, from the rumors I hear. This was top secret information, how to use public key encryption, and the military kept it secret. But unfortunately, they can't stop outside people from being intelligent, and mathematicians reinvented it on the outside. And that's why, one thing, by the way, I mentioned before the cicada contest. There is a contest that appears, I think maybe it doesn't happen anymore, but it used to. Every year or so, this picture of a cicada would appear on the internet, and hidden in the picture was a clue. It would take you to another website, and hidden in there was another clue, and it was very interesting, like a CTF. And around, I never got further than like number 8 or something, but people say after you got to like level 20, you had to sign an NDA, and everybody has followed it, and nobody's ever told them what happens behind that. But the belief is it's a recruitment tool for the British GCHQ, which is the equivalent of the NSA, because you don't want everybody. You want like the 10 people on Earth that love to solve puzzles like this. And if you're that kind of person, you really want to do the most interesting puzzles in the world, and nothing else matters, not money, not fame. And that's what they want. And so inside the NSA and GCHQ, they have amazing computers and amazing mathematical techniques that are classified, that never come out. So if you want to do the really exciting stuff, you vanish into this secret area and never come out. So these guys had this stuff for decades. But then people on the outside invented it, Diffie and Hellman, and that was the trick. So you could now agree on a key over a public internet where you send data through an untrusted channel where anybody can spy on the signals, which is like magic. And this is what made the modern internet possible. So you're trying to, you agree on a shared secret, and then you just hash the shared secret or something to make a key and use AES or something, so you make a secure channel out of it. So here's the basic function. The original Diffie-Hellman was based on RSA, essentially. And so you have the group G star P integers from 1 up to P minus 1, where P is prime. And so you choose two random elements to be your secrets. And you also choose a number G, which is not a secret, which is, I think, a generator of the group. And now you take A secret, you take G to the A, which gives you another element of the group, and you transmit that. The other person chooses a random element and takes G to the B and transmits that. And now I take my secret times the number I got from the other side, or I take the number I got from the other side to the power of my secret. And now I have G to the AB. And this person takes the number they got from the other side to the power of their secret, and they get the same answer, G to the AB. That's why, just like RSA, the math is very simple and easy to understand. And therefore, you can see the secrecy relies on the discrete logarithm problem. You cannot find from G to the A, you know G to the A, but you can't find A. That would be the discrete logarithm. And that turns out to be a hard problem. So that's the game. All right. Now
when you say elements, we are still talking about pieces.
Just numbers. Numbers from 1 to P. Yeah, just random numbers. Yeah. And so
not necessarily prime.
Apparently not. No. In RSA they had to be prime. Here apparently not. Anyway, so that's the game. The shared secret is not used directly. Oh yeah, like I say, you then pass it through a key derivation function, like a hash function, but we've covered that. That's pretty simple. So it turns out that P and G have to be prime, and there are certain rules. Just like with RSA, remember that video, fuck RSA, saying, in fact, it turns out to be harder than you think. There are certain rules. Both of these numbers should be prime. Those are called safe primes. All right. And with safe primes, okay. But safe primes are slow to generate. They take 1,000 times as long as generating mirror random primes, because you have to find the first number has to be prime, and then this related number has to be prime. And so you'd have to do like 1,000 guesses for this one, and then only 1 in 1,000 would pass that test. So it slows you down, but it does work. And so, like I said, I timed it here, and it might be the book time, this one, but they took like 150 seconds to generate Diffie-Hellman parameters, which is only 2048, which is not all that strong. So, that's an issue. It takes a long time. And RSA only took 0.17 seconds because it doesn't have to be safe primes. The RSA just had to find primes, but this one had to find safe primes, so it was 1,000 times longer, 150 seconds. So that's irritating. But, actually it's the basic discrete log. We transmitted G to the A over the network, the untrusted network, so everybody can see that, but we're hoping nobody can find A from it. So recovering A, and all you know is G to the A, that's the discrete logarithm problem. And that turns out to be a hard problem. So the attacker knows G to the A and G to the B. That's those things that were transmitted, but they don't know A or B, and they need to find at least one of these or they can't find the shared secret. All right, so if you're an eavesdropper, they might be possible to deduce this without specifically finding A and B. There might be some way to combine these to get there. Nobody's found a way to do that. But this is the same thing with all these public key systems. Maybe there's a shortcut. There's no proof that it will stay hard. It's just the case that nobody has found a way to solve it. All right, and so one way to do it is there's a thing called the number sieve and then a thing called the general field number sieve or something. These are techniques to find prime numbers. And it turns out that if you have 20,048-bit prime P, you get 90 bits of security. Like it's similar to RSA. Remember, RSA 1024 is not safe enough. 2048 is barely enough, like 90 or 100 bits of security. We really should be going to 3096 or 3072 or 4096. So it's similar. So the fastest attack is the number field sieve, and that's where they got this idea. You could crack this with 2 to the 90 calculations, is what they figured. All right. So if you only know G to the A and G to the B, but you want G to the AB, you can't deduce any portion of the shared secret because it appears to be random. That's the idea. And so if the decisional Diffie-Hellman problem is hard, then the CDH is also hard. This one, the computational Diffie-Hellman problem. Like I say, they seem very similar to me, but there are subtle mathematical differences. Anyway, they consider these abstract problems, and I used to struggle more to understand them, but all this has become obsolete anyway, so I wouldn't struggle with it too much. So the point is, they've studied these things to try to figure out how hard they are, and they've concluded they're both pretty hard if the parameters are well chosen. The problem is, of course, quantum computers are going to break all of this. That's what people are afraid of. If it weren't for quantum computers, everybody would keep using this and be happy with it because the math seems pretty good as anything else. So anyway, now you have a key agreement protocol. There are non-Diffie-Hellman ones. There's one called authenticated key agreement used by 3G and 4G. It uses only symmetric key operations, and it relies on a pre-shared secret. So this is another way to do it. If you had a pre-shared secret, then you could just turn it into an AES key and use it. I mean, that's a much simpler problem. If you're allowed to pre-exchange a secret, you don't really need public key encryption at all. So what they do here, since they have a private key, then they pick a random number, calculate a few values, send them across, and send another one. And the point is, you don't keep using the same key forever. You create a session key that you agree on for just one session, which is useful for forward secrecy. Forward secrecy is a desirable property, which means that even if someone steals the key, they will only be able to get into one session. Future sessions will not also be compromised. That's why it's better to add a random value that's changed for every session. This is a big issue now, and this is because of Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden leaked out the fact that the NSA had been hacking all the American companies and that they had been archiving all the data in the hopes of stealing the key later. And that made everybody update to TLS 1.2 that had forward secrecy. Before then, everybody was happy enough with TLS 1.1, and they said, well, what does it matter? But they became aware of this attack, and that motivated people to worry about forward secrecy. So now there's a problem in this case where you can have a replay attack, so the protocol makes sure you cannot reuse the random number twice. Stop that. So there's a new quantum chip that Microsoft recently created a breakthrough. Yes, that's a very good question, Yerbo. Microsoft claimed to have created Majorana particles. And if they had done that, that would be awesome. But as far as I can tell, the serious physicists say they didn't really do that. And so they claimed that they made these Majorana particles, and they would therefore be able to make chips with a lot of qubits on a chip. A lot of people said they don't really believe their evidence is good enough to prove they have this, so nobody knows. What they actually made is a chip that has 1 qubit. And they're developing a chip that has 4 qubits. And if they're right about how it works, they can be able to scale up to like 8, 16, 32 and get up to thousands and millions. So we'll see if that happens over the next decade or two. That's the issue. They claimed they had a new technology that would scale up much better. They have not proven that yet.
Yeah, there was a buffer. I saw the picture.
Yeah, they made, that has 1 qubit, but they claim they can cram a lot of qubits on there with this new technology, and other people say it's not really likely to work, so nobody knows. They have a prototype, like everybody else, and the question is, can you really scale it up? So we will find out. They're working on it, but people want to see more proof. If they really start making 4 and 8 and 16 and 32 on a chip, then I think we'll all start taking them more seriously. Right now, their prototype is not too impressive. It's a good question. Anyway, so if somebody was to steal K, they could perform a man-in-the-middle attack and impersonate either party. So, of course, if you compromise the shared secret, then, of course, you're shot. All right. So you consider your attack model. The eavesdropper is the main one, right, where you're a man in the middle and you can record messages. You also let them modify messages. So if you want to stop this, the protocol has to not leak any information about the shared secret. Another one I mentioned is the data leak, where if they manage to compromise one of the machines and steal all the secrets, how much do they get? And if they don't get the long-term secret, then they only get the stuff for that one session. And then there's a breach. If they learn the long-term secret, however, it's impossible to protect the current session from this attack, but the protocol can protect other sessions. A proper protocol with forward secrecy be, even if you know the key for one session, you cannot use it to predict the key for a future session. These are considered. So here's security goals. Authentication. It would be nice if you prove that you are authentic at both ends. Yeah, maybe quantum computing will be the new fusion, always 10 years away. Yes, that could be. That's why nobody really knows. And you could say cryptographers are sort of paranoid. Here we are changing everything because of this thing that doesn't even exist yet. But that's kind of what you have to do. It's going to take years to develop the new techniques, so we're all trying to be ahead of the game. So that even though the quantum computer won't really exist for like 20 years, we will have already switched to something it can't break. That's the idea. That's what you have to do when you're responsible. And this is, like I'm saying, this is what the Doge people don't understand. Government work involves thinking about what might go wrong and anticipating it and trying to protect from that, instead of just trying to make money today, which is the way you run Twitter. Yeah. Anyway, so all right, authenticated key agreement happens when you authenticate both parties. And key control, of course, is nice that neither party can control the final shared secret. And it turns out just one operator chooses ours, so that's an issue that it doesn't have. It's not true that both parties contribute to the shared secret. One effectively determines it, and that's considered a weakness. And I mentioned forward secrecy is a big one. So even if somebody manages to compromise the current session, can they predict the keys used in future sessions? And you don't want that because of this attack where you just archive all the network traffic and then later on infect a machine and steal the key, and then you can go back and decrypt all that archived traffic. And then, of course, performance, which is a big issue. The main cause of latency is typically round trip time. Computation also counts, and if it's going to take you 150 seconds to generate the key, that's unacceptable. But of course, they have faster things to generate keys. But the round trip time you can't usually really fix because you really are on the internet, and the person is, tens of milliseconds away. So that's an issue. So it'd be better to make a protocol that doesn't exchange too many messages. So 3G and 4G only exchange 2 messages, and you can pre-compute them. You could pick many values for R in advance and have them ready. So that would help with the performance. All right, so now we can get to Diffie-Hellman protocols. Anonymous Diffie-Hellman is this one. We describe the simplest case where you just pick a random A and a random B, and then you send G to the A and G to the B and multiply them. The problem with this is it's not authenticated. You could have somebody lie. You could have a man in the middle pretend to be Bob, and you would never know. So that's what we got here. So all Eve has to do is pick C and send G to the C to Bob. Now Bob will get this shared secret, and she'll be able to read it, and then she can send a different D over to here. So Alice thinks they're talking to Bob, and Bob thinks they're talking to Alice, but they're both talking to Eve, and Eve can read and modify everything. This is bad. Your protocol that's the problem. It's anonymous. It didn't authenticate the people at either end, so now the man in the middle can totally defeat it. So the cure is authenticated Diffie-Hellman. You use public key signatures to sign the messages, so Alice has a private key and a public key, and the public key is stored on some trusted server. So Bob can get Alice's genuine public key and therefore prove that Alice really signed it with that private key, and now the person in the middle cannot trick the signature scheme. That's the idea. And there's nothing wrong with that. That works. All right. Except, of course, that all this stuff, as we've formulated now, relies on prime numbers and multiplying to taking the powers and stuff, and that's the stuff that the quantum computers are going to break. So the authenticated Diffie-Hellman stops eavesdroppers, and neither party can control the shared secret, and the attacker can't learn the shared secret, so it's pretty good. It stops eavesdroppers. Now, Eve can record and replay previous values of this to pretend to be Alice, but of course all she would get for that is encrypted data she can't decrypt. But anyway, there is something called key confirmation that could prevent that, where you send a message to prove that they both own the shared secret. Encrypt something and send it over and make sure it decrypts at the other end. All right, if Eve has A, the secret, then she can impersonate Alice. So if you want to prevent this, then you add a long-term secret into the shared secret calculation. So you verify the signature using this public key and check if the signature is valid. That's the long-term secret. Now you have a long-term public key and private key that identifies you. And you include that, and the attacker can't do that. Even knowing this A doesn't mean they know the private key. So that's the idea. So you can take the same components we have and combine them to fix these things. So this thing, MQV, is an improved version. It came out in 98, and NSA approved it. It's considered more secure than authenticated Diffie-Hellman and has better performance. And every single chapter has been the same. There's a standard. Then they came up with something better, but since there's nothing really wrong with the standard, nobody cares. So that's MQV, and it's quite similar. G to the A is A and G to the B is B, and you send it across, but there's also X and Y long-term public keys and long-term private keys. So it's essentially doing the same thing, but it just is done in a way that is faster. All right. And so if they get the ephemeral secrets, they can't find the shared secret because they don't know the long-term private key. So it's fine, just an improved version. If there's a breach and they get the long-term private key, then previous sessions are still safe because they used ephemeral private keys. There is an attack that could compromise a targeted old session. And anyway, there's a few attacks anyway, it's rarely used. In fact, it was encumbered by patents and complicated and difficult, and the older, simpler one was good enough for most purposes, just like every chapter. There's a standard that was good enough, and until it's really broken, no one's going to bother implementing the newer, better one. And now we have motivation, though, so anyway, to talk about the things that can go wrong. If you just use the shared secret and don't hash it, that's not good, because this is not really a random number, this G to the AB. And if you take like just the first 128 bits of it, that's not probably really random. That's why it would be better to go through a key derivation function where you hash it and make it, scramble it around, so the key you make is really that way. Using a proper key derivation function is a wiser way to do it. Because, right, this is going to be in the range of 1 to p, therefore the higher order bit is more likely to be 0. A lot of these numbers are small. So, hashing it is the solution for that. A key derivation function that does like 1,000 hashes with SHA-1 or SHA-256 or something. There were old ciphers that actually used anonymous Diffie-Hellman. Here's the name you'd see if you catch the handshake with Wireshark. Diffie-Hellman Anonymous with AES 128, cipher block chaining, SHA. These are the protocols used in TLS, and these are now deprecated. Anonymous Diffie-Hellman is considered unsafe because it's subject to a man-in-the-middle attack, and there's no reason to put up with that. And of course, OpenSSL allowed unsafe primes. So you could craft parameters that leaked information about the private key, and that was only fixed in 2016. So this is like that RSA talk from last time. Even though the math looks good, in fact, the early implementations made various mistakes that made it weak. All right, but now, of course, this is the big thing. This is the stuff I added today. And that's why we were talking earlier about how there's a new version of the book, and I say it doesn't matter because the new version needs to come next year, because this is the stuff that needs to be in a new version, and this was approved in October 24. And this is, by the way, still a draft, because the government is very conservative. They had like a 5-year competition to choose these quantum-proof algorithms, and they don't really trust them yet. There's still active research and arguing, so they're not ready to make an official certified approval of them yet, but there's a few that have been approved to some extent. So the transitioning cryptographic algorithms to survive this. So the key, here's the document from National Institute of Standards, and here's what's approved. You can still use Diffie-Hellman, MQV, and RSA with long keys, like 4096. Those are approved past 2030. But we really should be moving to the quantum resistant ones, and FIPS is the government document that specifies that, and the one they recommend is MLKEM, and it comes in 3 sizes for the different cryptographic strengths. And these are effectively the same as AES 128, 256, and 192. So here's the standard. And so there are 3 algorithms you need. You need to generate keys, then you encapsulate the key to make something to share across the network, and then you decapsulate the key to use it at the other end. Those are the 3 algorithms you need. And so here's how it works. Alice and Bob are trying to communicate. So Alice generates a key with a keygen algorithm, and then she encapsulates it and sends that over the network. Bob takes the encapsulation key and encapsulates that, and it creates a ciphertext, which can then go here. And I think they've added a sort of random number to it that Bob chose here. So that's sent back to here, and Alice, combining her decapsulation key with the data she got over the network, can create a shared secret. And Bob, combining his key with his private key with the data he got from the network, can also do it. So it's structurally very much like the Diffie-Hellman protocol. We have G to the AB, G to the AB, but the actual math underlying it is this lattice encryption math, which is pretty mind-boggling, but doesn't really matter. The linear logic is the same, and the Python libraries make it very easy. So we'll do it in the demo today. So it comes to 3 parameter sets for different categories, and these are 1, 3, and 5. Like I said, this is AES 128, and this is AES 256 in security, essentially. All right, and so we got a project, which I'll just demonstrate now. I think let's do a Kahoot first, though. This is for chapter 11. All right. All right. 141, chapter 11, right there. How handy. All right. All right. Oh, I better move this a little over. It's cutting off the last digit. There. Stepped out. He'll be back in a few minutes anyway, so I'll wait long enough for him to come back. Oh, good. At least 3 competitors. If we get 4, there's actual contest. Oh, good. Much better. Anyway, I'm going to wait a couple minutes for Anthony to come back. One good thing about these remote classes, everybody should be comfortable. I hope. sophisticated, I might pause the video while waiting, but I don't think I know how to do that. Oh, just as well. Good. Okay, good. Fair enough. He's coming back. We should be ready to go in a minute here. All right. So let's give it a shot. All right, so what modulus should you use in Diffie-Hellman? You need a safe prime. It's not the product of two primes, it's a prime. But not only should the number be prime, but half the number minus 1 should also be prime. That's what you need. That's the safe prime that are pretty difficult to find. It takes a lot of computing time to find them. All right, which one is a fast attack on Diffie-Hellman? Yeah, the number sieve, a fast way to perform a effectively discrete logarithm problem, or to find the product, to factor a prime, that sort of thing. All right, or to find prime numbers for that. Various ways you can do, things you can do with it. All right, so which process will mitigate against man-in-the-middle attacks? Authentication, I mean, knowing who you're talking to, obviously, is how you make sure you're not talking to an evil person in the middle. And by the way, we were talking about this on Pulse Security Weekly right before I got here. Katie Mazuris, I think, some important security person just came out and said, oh, the head of CISA, Jen Easterly, and she said all of security is really authentication. Knowing who you're dealing with is the really hard problem. So, and certainly it's a big one. I don't know if it's everything, but it's a big one. How do you really know that that's the right person? All right, so what's the most secure system but rarely used? The MQV is the new one that is more secure, but didn't get very popular for the usual reasons. It was just sort of irritating to use, and the old one was good enough. Oh yeah, I got the Hope shirt today. Hope is fun conference. I should be there this year, hopefully. Anyway, if you want your points, you have to tell me who you are. Hope, I think I know who the others are. Anyway, let me stop this one.